What's up, everybody? Welcome to, we're not calling it episodes, we're calling it the second lesson in education. We're calling it Embrace the Different. You're going to see in the title that it's spelled a little, not spelled different, Different. It's spelled Difflarent, because we're going to be talking about neurodiversity, and they call it being different. So we're really kind of just going to get into that. I know it's a term that a lot of you probably have never heard of. I didn't hear about it until like maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. So we're kind of going to get into it, and then I'm gonna give Reggie the floor to kind of discuss what it is. But first, I'm gonna ask Reggie, how you doing, man? I know you're on the way back to home.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'm went to go visit my family. I actually worked from Mississippi this week. Did some virtual stuff back from my home back in my home area in Mississippi and Alabama, and now I'm headed back to Missouri. So yeah, man, just on this road, man. Headed home, and then next week, excited about tomorrow. I'm getting my vaccine tomorrow, and got to go clean my car and do a lot of little errands and take care of, that business, grown folk business, being an adult, and took Monday off and from work. So I'm not doing anything work-wise Monday. So I'm gonna work on, taking care of myself after have a long trek home from my hometown and everything.
Yeah, man, I get that, man. I've had a week off, and I got back into the work grind about a month ago, and it's kind of been a little overwhelming, kind of trying to get up to speed while at the same time teach children and do things like that. So this week off was kind of good for me, not just to rest, but just really to catch up and kind of get back. Someone will write about it a little later. Probably release shortly after this releases. I'm gonna release my reflection on that and how, just getting back to myself and kind of get back in a sense of normalcy. And then at the same time, why it's important for me kind of to be ahead. That's something that helps me. And we're kind of gonna get into why that's important for me, being a little ADHD, why it's good to really be ahead, because I don't really do well with in-between tasks sometimes. All right.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Now that we got all the pleasantries out the way, so Reg, I'm just gonna give you the floor, man. Just explain to everybody what neurodiversity is. I mean, I know we're coming with some weird topic, guys, but I think it's some things employers and HR people and things need to know about. So tell everybody what neurodiversity is and what it means.
Yeah, it's a term that has been coined by Judy Singer. She's a sociologist, and she did this back in 1998, but it didn't really catch on, and it's starting to catch on now when people have started examining, the psychology world and neuroscience world have started to look at how people think, and it's not looking at it as being necessary deficits, as everybody has always called them deficits. Whether you was talking about ASC, mental health, acquired neurodiversity, Tourette's, ADHD, dyslexia, dysgraphia, whatever D that you want to look at it as far as that, Asperger's, autism, so it's a lot of different things that people have been diagnosed with. But what's beginning to happen is that they're beginning to find out that the brain is so is so divergent. Neurons act to certain things and react to certain things. They diverge in such a way that causes us to act, behave, and to react to the stimulus different. We can all be exposed to the same type of stimulus, but we can all react different to it because our neurons diverge different and they connect different, and therefore you create different wiring within the nervous system. And so sometimes, what we would call normal in some environments is not necessarily normal in other environments based upon where you're at. So, Miss Judy Singer coined that term in 1998, and that was a tongue twister right there. But it just really looks at the various ways regarding sociability, learning, attention, mood, and other mental functions, and how we all respond as humans.
Man, that's cool. And I know some of y'all, oh man, there's so much that goes into that. But the thing is, to know down self is the best thing. So it's something we really need to tap into. And as we're really going to take a deeper dive into like employers and knowing people that are different, because many of us are different and think different. And sometimes they're different and don't realize it. So let's get into why it could be such a superpower. Like, I guess I'll start off a little bit. I know just having an understanding of it, I feel like, myself being a little or a lot of ADHD, it for a time, it probably was something that probably hurt me even in the workplace setting, depending on environments I in, because I always forgot stuff. And the crazy part was, even as a kid, there were signs there. People didn't, as you both know, and both of us from a whole country town.
Oh yeah.
So it wasn't no such thing as ADHD and none of these things. They'll just say you hyper or you need to sit your tail down somewhere. And
right.
I saw an old wedding video. My grandma was holding me the whole time. I wouldn't stop moving. When I was younger, when I would go visit my dad on the weekend, I always would leave something. Like the signs were there. It's just I was a good student. I never got in trouble, so it wouldn't cause me behavior issues. So nobody ever said, "Oh, you got ADHD or you got any of that stuff," because I never could sleep during nap time. It was always little things always there. It's just nobody ever took heed to it. And as I became an adult, it's things that it crept up because I do have that mental exhaustion. I do have those things going on. Like I still can't read a book without listening to music or have some form of white noise.
Right.
So I still have those issues, but I get to the part where it's a bit of a superpower, man, because like I'm very good with schedules, and it's something I didn't realize I was really good at. But as somebody that's ADHD, you almost have to be the way, because if you don't put it on the schedule, it's not on a task list or something like that, it's pretty high chance you're gonna forget it. So you almost become very skilled at that because you know how much time you need to do stuff. And it's even still taking me some years to get this one right, but I try to stay on task and stay doing the same thing, especially working on a little project or something you need to do for work. But being ADHD, your mind might go, "Oh, I'm working on these lesson plans," and you're like, "Oh man, I feel like working on my intervention thing." So I just started doing that instead of just staying on the. It's like my mind just works like that. So now I'm learning like it's okay. You might diverge for 30 minutes, but as long as you come back home and get it all done, it really don't matter. You know what I'm saying? So and just make sure you keep yourself on task, but it's kind of become a superpower because I can hyper focus. First, in my writing career, now as a teacher, I just get hyper focused on. Now it creates a bit of a tunnel vision at times, but at the same time, I have that hyper focus on what I'm doing, and it's enabled me really to grow in an exponential rate as a teacher. So I feel like it has become a bit of a superpower, even though there's ways where I think I probably can improve by maybe getting the right dosage and getting the dosage and maybe being a bit more, I guess you would say, under control and a bit more focused in what I'm doing.
Yeah, and it's just like a person that that learns themselves that quote unquote think that they're normal. We all have things that we have to put in place in order to help us to cognitively survive. I know for myself, people always say, well, you can only function off 4 or 5 hours of sleep. Yeah, that's part of my superpower. Being able to function off 4 or 5 hours of sleep easily if I need to. Also being able to multitask, also being able to hear and understand multiple conversations, being very empathetic, even if it's something that I'm not necessarily experienced with or inept to. Because of the way my brain works, when somebody tells me something they're going through, I can actually put myself in their shoes because my brain can actually go there without necessarily changing who I am. So I'm able also to empathize with them and have the cognitive ability to not necessarily allow my pattern of my brain to think as I would usually think, but to think as if they were thinking. So, that's one of the superpowers that, we talked about right there. And, one of the things that I love about this term, it kind of removes the stigma and, and those things of being deficit, like you said, being hype, being able to like jumping from one conversation to another. People would call me sporadic. They would call me, hyperactive, or they would just say, man, that boy crazy. That dude crazy, man. He be jumping around. He always excited about stuff. And, but at the same time, instead of having that stigma, now people can look at it because of more education out there. Hey, that person is just kind of more in tune with their emotions. They're more in tune with different sets of people. Like one of my strengths on Strength Finder is woo and includer. Woo is win others over, and includer and maximizer. Those are three of them. And the reason why I'm mentioning those three is because maximizer, they always say maximizers are always late. and I try to maximize and suck out like if I'm focused on something, I'm gonna get it done. No matter if somebody say you got 30 minutes to do it, if it ain't done in 30 minutes, I'm still gonna stay there. And that's that hyper, that's that hyper focus that whenever I need something to get done, I can get it done. And so, like I said, this term basically allows us to be able to look at, hey, let's look at these, let's look at the benefits of this. Now, we need to start placing, like even in the classroom, in the business world, when we're training people, being able to put them in situations in which all different types of learners can thrive. And part of doing that is, as an instructor, facilitator, whatever you are, you have to gauge the environment and the and engage the atmosphere in your room and wherever you're at. But you also, even if you don't necessarily know that, because I do a lot of public speaking engagement and motivational speaking, I incorporate every presentation to try to touch every type of person or learning style, or the hyperactive person. Like that's why I'm big on including music in my presentations. I have videos in my presentation. I have polls and surveys in my presentation. I have things where I get people to say something to somebody else. I tell stories. So, and then I also give reflective time. And then I'm always telling people to write stuff down. And then also have some type of activity where they use their cell phone or something. So yeah.
So, and here's the thing too, it naturally transitions into the application piece of it. Because people are like, what does this look like in the classroom? What does it look like in the corporate world? Of how you can apply that as far as that neurodiverse thinking. And I even can say it like as a teacher. So I always tell people, I'm a little ADHD myself. So when I'm putting together lessons, something I'm pretty good at is lesson design. So when I'm putting together lessons, I'm like, yo, if it's boring to me, I know for sure it's gonna be boring to an 8, 9, or 10-year-old. So, you always think about how you put lessons together, but let's attack some of those terms like kids that are dyslexic or kids that are autistic or ADHD and things like that. With that, so say for example, a lot of times I introduce lessons with video. So say if a kid's not a strong reader because they're dyslexic, they, may not be a strong reader. So seeing a video, and then here's the thing about dyslexic kids as well, and there's some, type of things we can dive into, is that they tend to be higher order thinkers still. It doesn't affect intelligence. That's a big misnomer. Dyslexia doesn't affect, your intelligence. And that even, dyslexia is another thing too, more in the corporate world, in the regular working world, they even say people that are dyslexic do a great job of working with people because they're always used to working with people. So, and then
it's like what you were saying here, when you talk about like, let's apply this, and I'm gonna look at it from a work standpoint. I have hyperactivity, inattentiveness, ADHD. So whenever somebody sends me an email, if I ask people not to send me paragraphs, send me bullet points and straight sentences, because I have to spend 5 to 10 minutes reading a paragraph 6 times or more so that I can actually understand it. If I go line by line, I can get it done just like that. My brain quickly process bullet points, quickly process, task one thing at a time, one point at a time. I love for things to be numbered. I love for things to be bullet pointed. And so I function better that way, or short paragraphs, but when you have these long drawn out paragraphs, that sometimes can be a problem. And the same thing when I present. If somebody has Asperger's, a lot of people, some people that has Asperger or autism, they don't like to be touched. So if you're having a hands-on activity and you know that those people like to work alone, you give people options to work alone. Because sometimes anxiety working with other people, because they're in their mind, when you tell them to work with other people, they're trying to figure out, how do I not hurt this person? How do I not make this person mad at me? So they spend more time worrying about that than they actually do completing the task. But if you actually give them that option to say, hey, you can work with somebody or you can work alone. That is so important in that.
Well, and to piggyback off of that, man, the thing that's so crazy about that too, you're saying give people those options. We know no matter what world we're in, I'm an elementary teacher, so it's always about working with people, being all bubbly, and they give, cool points to extroverts. Me and you have talked about that. Me and you have a similar mindset, but you're the extrovert type. So, people give more cool points to the extrovert because it seems like they're more agreeable and nicer or something like that. In actuality, they just, they get their energy from people. An introvert does not. That don't mean something's wrong with them. They're alien or anything. Matter of fact, I think 50% of the people in the world are introverts and 50% are extroverts. So, is it really something wrong with a person? It's half the world is built that way for a reason. So, so it's kind of one of those things like, so if a person's autistic or something like that, but if they're brilliant, most people that are Asperger's tend to be geniuses. But what do you mean? You don't really want to use that person? Because, what if your job is a person's a data analyst or something to that effect? Do you really care if they're good at working with people? I'm like, they may not be the best at that, but they can crunch them numbers. So it's kind of like, you got to think about what you're valuing in the workplace. And what if a person like that is a teacher? There's a lot of things like that. Like, even myself being ADHD, I'm not going to be the best with tasks. And, getting to talking to other people who kind of think the same way, you get so focused on the big tasks that the little tasks kind of, say I'm thinking about teaching the kids. I'm not thinking about if this random thing is turned in on time that don't affect anything. Like my mind don't shift to that. So that don't mean I'm somebody that want to perform their professional responsibilities. It's just that my mind don't click that way. So it's kind of, it was like one of those things. So there's a lot of things like that. So if employers can be, go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and understanding that, understanding that, like you just said, how some people, what makes them click. And I tell people all the time, so that person may not be lazy, but they need to understand why they're doing what they're doing, and they need to connect with how their brain functions. And there are such thing too as people being in the wrong job, being in the wrong task. And so if they are in the wrong career or wrong workforce or wrong position, as a leader, a lot of time it is your responsibility. You've been put in a place, that, and you're emotionally intelligent. It is your responsibility to help push that person along and guide them towards where they probably need to be, and by helping them learn themselves. That's one of the things that I always tell employers is that how important it is to have your staff take personality tests, strength tests, emotional intelligence tests. And I think we need to start transitioning that into the classroom and into education also too.
Oh, for sure.
Yes, people need to know themselves.
I can give you a perfect example. Like last year, I kind of tapped in a little bit to the DISC assessment. And I really, I took my own. I was a high D, and with a cross with an S. And it even said that me, I was a person that, of course, like results oriented, and of course, I'm not big with rules. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of skirt the rules or whatever to get my results. But I'm also a cross with the S. But that says that I have to basically need the facts before I support you. I'm not just gonna blindly support you. I need to know why. But once you do, I'll be like, all right, cool, I got you.
Yeah, and I'm an I and a D. I'm the hype man. You know what I'm saying? I'm the hype man. I get excited. And it's like, even sometimes I'm misunderstood because I'm always excited and talking to people and laughing and smiling. Sometimes people think, oh, he's not really doing any work until you see his results. And it's like, wait, he was working, but he was laughing and joking around and visiting everybody at the same time. Yes, that's the way that's the way eyes function. And as a D, and the D in me is very result oriented.
Right.
It's like,
it's a high combination.
It's a bad combination. It can be very bad because I can go from being this nice guy to being like, hey, where's the results at? Man, you're sucking right now. Get it together. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And where I can turn real cold like that. And it could be like, people be like, man, you're no longer Mr. Nice Guy. And I'm like, I'm still this, but you need to get this done. And so, and it kind of messes you up. And then also too, I'm also the type of person, if I don't find purpose or if I don't find something necessary, I won't give a maximum effort. That's that D coming out, which is the rebellious part of me, which is saying, hey man, you just got me doing this stuff to make yourself look good, or you got me doing this stuff to waste my time, and I'm not doing it. Here's the results right here.
Oh, trust me, I know about that one. Yeah. That's kind of one of my biggest bugaboos.
Yeah. If you tell me to do it this way and I find out I can get a result quicker doing it this way, I'm going to go complete opposite way you did to get the same result or better, and then point it back in your face and be like, why would you have me doing all this when it could be just done right like this? And then that's what some things cause conflict.
Well, and it's too late. So say like you building a teaching team, and I get to the classroom as well with this. So I think I went to a training once. They kind of touched on it. I don't think they called it DISC assessment at the time, but it was pretty much the same thing. they talked about, so say for example, if you got a team full of people that are high eyes, and the whole team is eyes, nothing will get done. Nothing.
Nothing will get done.
All they gonna do is talk.
Yep.
Because that's who they are. But you need that person that's like a D to be like, hey, we need to review this data for this test. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Or you need that C. Go ahead.
Yes. And you need that C to question and analyze everything.
Right. Make sure the rules are being followed.
Yeah, and you need the S to kind of bring harmony to everybody. Be like, hey man, y'all need to come. You know, like the S is harmonizer. They want to see everybody working together. And I would call the S personality the HR personality. You know what I'm saying? They want everybody to work and everything to be equal and fair. And so you need each one of those types of personalities when you're working within a group. I tell people all the time, I like working with C people and I also give C people the right, whenever I have a quiet intro, and you know this being one of my best friends, I give you the right to check me. I give you the right to say what you want to say to me because you're more introspective than I am. So in that situation, that's where knowing yourself is so important. And even when we look at neurodiversity, understanding the people that are around you. Like, so, you know, even though we're very similar, we're also very different. And that could probably cause conflict if we're having a strong conversation, but us having an understanding of each other, we're like, oh, okay, I see why you feel that way. I see why, okay, let me think about it his way then, because, you know, he's looking at something that I'm not looking at.
Well, I think it helps too, because I'm not a cross with a C. So you being an I and a D, like my C ain't never gonna be like, hey, Reggie, you follow the rules, bro. I'm a high D, so I'm gonna be like, all right, cool. And then, you know what I'm saying? And then you being across with the D, you understand the results-oriented part of it. And then with me being supportive, I won't harm me. So I think it just never, if I was part C, I think it'd be like, Reggie, I don't know, bro. Like, you need to like, I don't know. So I think it'd be times where I'll probably be like, I don't know. But being a high D, I don't care about rules. So it's kind of like that C would never cross up with your D. And then I guess you don't, that has C, so you don't, because I'm a high D, so I definitely don't care about the rules half the time. So
I have no C. I have no C nowhere near me. I got 5% of S, but I have no C. Like C is like zero and everything.
You know what's hilarious?
So, what's up?
No, I say what's hilarious is we went on a family trip last year around this time, and then my whole family took one of those assessments. Literally nobody, and I mean nobody, got anything in the C. I'm dead serious. I was like, everybody was like a DI or maybe an S, but no C's anywhere. So, like, this is absurd. Man.
Yes, and that's why I tell businesses, man. I say, you know, it's up to you on what kind of personality assessment or strength finder or whatever you want to, you know, give to your people. But it's very important to find that out. I think we need to use that more in education too, because I think it was for kids. It was for kids to learn more about themselves. You know, think about a conversation of a child now discovering, oh, I can do, this is my strength. And then they having another conversation with another child, you know, this is what I got. And then, oh, that's what you got? Oh, and then they start talking about each other's weaknesses. You give that to a child and you empower a young child with that. And then, but you also need to let them know that you grow and you change and you evolve. So that's the cool thing with the DISC. I took it years ago and I took it again. My D actually has gotten higher over the years. I used to be extremely high I, and my D was kind of low, but now my D has gotten higher as I've gotten older. And so, you know, and it's the same way I always tell people too, with any kind of test or anything like that. And that's the cool thing about neurodiversity. You grow in everything. Like you grow in empathy. You grow in emotional intelligence. You grow in being able to communicate. So all of those things are so important when we're talking about neurodiversity, because it's a constantly evolving thing, which is really cool when you actually look at it, because you really can't, basically what this term tells us, we can't put people in a box, and we can't put even the same person, once we get to know them, we can't put them in the same box we had them in last year.
Well, and two, I can speak to the classroom aspect of it, because I did start learning about the DISC assessment. I went to a training with a conference guy, Eric Thomas, and That's something he's actually selling books, and he wrote a book that's tailored towards 7th through 12th graders, talking about their superpower, their DISC assessment. And this again goes conversation between me and Reggie. We started with just regular neurodiversity, and we dig into the DISC assessment, we goes into that. But in the classroom, that kid that's a high D, they'll be the one that you might say is a bully and this, and this. But they're normally the kid, if you can focus that energy and get them like a task where they're leading or doing something where they feel important, that kid, that behavior, and I saw that even last year, I had a student that I had a similar archetype, and had a similar personality type, and his behavior improved. You got the kid that's an I, those are the ones that won't shut up. I can guarantee you. The I's are going to be the ones that won't shut up, but they'll be the ones when you have class activities, they'll be the ones talking, they'll be the most outgoing as far as sharing out in class discussion. They'll normally give people advice when they say things. That's just because they're naturally geared, but you're always telling them to shut up and be quiet, when really you need to find a way to use that as an asset instead of trying to demean them for talking. The school is so militaristic, like people get so offended if a child talks in class and disrespectful. Hey, that's their natural inclination to talk.
And I got in trouble a lot. I got in trouble a lot because, like I was, mainly a straight A student. I had a couple of B's, but I was a straight A student, but I would get in trouble all the time. And it was because I was talking. And it was because I went to sit down in my seat. And it was because I was always like, when I finished my work, and I would always tell the team, when they tried to, I'm like, I'm finished. Like, what you want me to do? You know what I'm saying? And I even would tell them that. And then they would try to give me more work. And I'm like, no, that ain't fair. You ain't finna grade me on no work. And you ain't grading nobody else on the same work. And then they would really get mad then because I would call them out. But that's the way my I and D was in full force when I was in high school and junior high.
Well, and that's the thing too. I think I was blessed to have pretty good teachers. So even though I was a D, and probably less of it back then, I never been like the emotional type. So when I was in class, I wouldn't really talk that much. Because in a sense, I am supportive, so I was the type that I just wouldn't, even though these aren't natural rule followers, that don't mean you walk around breaking the rules. Like, you know what I'm saying? So I think that's maybe why I was a little, it means you might forget the rules when you're trying to get your result. But if you're in class and you're going to get your result regardless, ain't no reason. And I'm naturally supportive too. So I'm going to be the one that might be considered a teacher's pet. Because if I like the teacher, I'm just going to roll with what they're doing. So it's kind of like that type of thing. And that's the thing too. The kid that's an S, one thing they were talking about us at the conference, they were saying the S will be the kid that's maybe be the one running around with the bad crowd. Because they're just trying to support their friend. But the thing is, with those type of kids, you try to find a way to steer them toward the right people. Because people like that become agents, managers. That's what they become. So they're just supporting their friends.
And I think that's the thing, man. You gotta, change up your teaching strategy, instruction strategies. Because like I said, ADHD, autism, Asperger's, dyslexia, and all those things they're not abnormal. Those things we should be leveraging those things. We should be looking at a classroom in which we can do more activities. And that's why all the time when I present, whenever I'm doing it with my stuff with Harris Multifaceted, I always try to do a variety of different things. I even give infographics at the end of my presentations for those people that like summaries. So it can really stick in with them. So they get infographics. That's one thing I use, infographics at the end to summarize everything that I went over. Just really hit the high notes. And then I give them the option to record. I give them the option to take pictures of the visual aids. I give them options to stand up, walk around. Like I said, I do the music stuff. If I make them reflect, if I got them like thinking and doing some cognitive thinking, some meditation, I turn on music while I got them thinking or processing information and say, okay, write this down. Okay, get in your phone, do this. Okay, do this. But I got music going on in the background. And even for those people that like to dance, I do that before class to get that nervous energy out of people. Because sometimes people walk into a room and what they call lizard eyes. They looking around and wondering, oh man, what is going on here? Who do I know here and stuff like that. And music has a way of relaxing us all. And it makes it more friendly. When there's no mute, when that music background going on, the vibration of good music, good clean music calms the sales down. And so when you're doing that, and that's scientifically proven, when you're doing that, you're actually calming the anxiety of somebody that has some anxiety. And if it's dancing music, you know, then that person, their cells wake up and they're like, yeah, it's early in the morning, but I'm feeling good. This music has got me going. Or they might be sitting at their desk by themselves and then they start tapping to the music or bobbing their head. Now, guess what just began to happen to their anxiety? It is now decreased. And if they're talking to somebody, you know how it is when you're having a one-on-one conversation with the music playing in the background, they're not worried about who else is listening to their conversation. They're actually having a conversation that actually calms them down in the midst of a public situation. And so now so all of those things are practical things that I do. And like I said, my hands-on people, you know, and sometimes I get them up in the morning, and I like maybe have them do like a little upper body stretch or something like that, or whatever it is to, you know, to get them going. And my talkative people, I have certain parts where I say, okay, we're going to take 3 questions. Now that's the other thing too. You have to plan too. You have to be very specific on what you're doing. You know what I'm saying? Because like a lot of times you say, all right, we're going to open the floor for questions. But if you have a lot of I's and D's in there, they'll take over. And you also have to learn how to shut one topic off. And then you just, once you learn how to do that, it's like, okay, we're going to move on. Hey, if you want to talk about that, hey, write that down, write your thoughts down and email me. Write your thoughts down. We're going to talk about it after class. Write your thoughts down. Hey, send me a text message. Do this, do that. You see what I'm saying? So now what's happening is you've been able to leverage every type of person in that room. That person with Asperger, that person with ADHD, that person with autism, that person with dyslexia, all of that stuff now have them engaged. You know, even the person that's very introverted don't want to be bothered with anybody. You know, they can zone out in their own world with the music. They can zone out in their own world doing the presentation. You know, they can do their own thing. But a lot of times you'll see that with people that are like that too. They might be looking down at their phone the whole time, but they may have to look at their phone in order to focus. I'm gonna tell you a quick story, and then I'm gonna let you get back to it. But I had one of my other bosses, and love her to death. She helped me develop, but she was my boss of my boss. And I was in one of her workshops one day, and I was having a crazy, crazy day. And in order to focus, I had to like play with my phone, play with a lot of stuff. And she thought I was just being disrespectful. But what I was doing was so that my mind wouldn't drift to all the stuff that was going on in my heart and in my mind, I needed to distract myself so I could actually listen and pay attention in class so my brain wouldn't think about the problems and the mental, I was going through some trauma. I was going through some stuff. So my mind wouldn't drift there. I had to pick at something. I had to draw. I had to bang at something so that I could be present with where I was.
Right. And the thing, and I guess it's going to kind of shift us into like, with that part of it, we kind of took a deep dive into what it looks like. And I think a lot of people are like trying to have that understanding of it, but we're showing you what it looks like in the real world. And so it can seem more tangible to y'all. Now, the question I'm asking is, I was reading through the website on Neurodiversity. They say a lot of people still view these things. Of course, like I worked at a school where 80% of the kids were autistic, and I've seen kids with these conditions. It's almost seemed like, it's just a disorder and a disability and something that's, shouldn't be praised at all. So why do you think that is, Reggie, that people look at it that way?
Well, because here's the thing, like when you're used to the way that you learn, you used to, because you can be in any situation where you're the majority. So if you're in the majority, it's easy for you to say, well, I learned this way. Oh, all my friends that in these same positions learn that way. Oh yeah, we all think this way. We all do it this way. And why can't you do it this way? You must have the problem. It's basically human pack mentality. And it's like, it comes back to a primal instinct. A lot of times that's the reason why I don't get on people that, I usually try to, explain to them, hey, you just having a primal instinct of pack mentality. Me and my group, we feel this way. Why can't you feel the way that we feel? And I try to reach them where I understand. It's like, it's easy. I said, what if you were put in a situation? And I said, there's something about you that is a minority to other people. You know, everything about you is not a part of the majority. I said, so you got to begin to start thinking like that. Because anything in the world, if the right leader or the right group of people put a stigma on it, it can be used as a way to downgrade people. And at the same time, elevate yourself to build your own self-esteem while yet killing somebody else's accomplishments and killing their opportunities and making them feel like they're not good people and they're not the best of persons. And what ends up happening is we end up hurting ourselves in the long run, because at the same time, we still have to work with these people. We still have to interact with these people. So my thing about it is I want to interact and be around people that are not mediocre, that are not, you know, it's like what Nick Saban said, you know, high achievers hate mediocre people hate high achievers. So my whole thing, reason why I feel like this is important is because we want everybody to achieve and be high achievers in their niche. Everybody needs to be a high achiever in their niche. If you're a high achiever in your niche, guess what that does for me? That enhances me. I'm motivated by you. I'm inspired by you. I see your strengths. If this is not my strength, I can go to you and ask you to do this for me. I can come to you and say, hey, you know, I got this situation. I know you're very introspective. Can you help me out in this? And then guess what began to happen? The more I appreciate you, the more I appreciate myself. And then therefore that begins to curtail a lot of self-esteem issues, a lot of stuff that a lot of us go through and where we feel less than and inadequate and we don't feel like we deserve stuff. And I feel in the mental health.
Right. And I just take over. I know Reggie's having like probably went through a dead spot, but I wanted to touch on that too. Like within the classroom, just looking at some of these terms: ADHD, autistic, Asperger's, dyslexic. Now, kids that are Asperger's tend to be pretty intelligent, so they're gonna probably ace test. I'm telling you that right now. They're gonna make.
Yeah,
I had a kid that was I'm sure it was Asperger's, and that kid, I still remember he would finish 40 question reading assessments in like an hour and 15 minutes. And I still remember one particular conversation. I think it was after a particular test, and he missed a question. And I was like, man, if you hadn't rushed, I bet you would have got that question right. And he was like, man, I only missed 2. I was like, okay, I'm gonna shut up now. And you look at also kids that are, you know, ADHD, you know, just from a teacher perspective, I'm just gonna give y'all this insight. You know, when kids ADHD, autistic, or dyslexic, or anything like that, none of those kids weren't gonna be under a label as 504, SPED, anything like that. You know, from a behavior standpoint, you want a kid that's ADHD, some kind of add their medicine, because it tends to affect their behavior. It isn't just them not sitting down. Some kids have real challenges when it comes to that. So you don't always look at it as a good thing when a kid is a little hyper or a little ADHD, especially if you got a bunch of the little people that are like that. It can be very tough when that medicine wear off. It can get very interesting. So I'm just keeping it with that. Autistic, typically if a kid is definitely truly autistic in that way, not Asperger's or something like that, that normally comes with they're probably going to be under a SPED label. There are some kids that are forcing something. So in the school context, that's why that kind of stigma kind of starts there, because they're kind of seen as those are the ones that not going to pass tests. We want the ADHD kid to be on their medicine so they can perform their optimal performance.
And it's very important that parents understand this too. You know, a lot of times they're so quick to put kids on, you know, different medications. I have no problem with medications. That
some of them need
it. Yeah, some of them do need it. And that's why I'm in full support of it. But it's just like with me, I've always treated mine with more stuff to do, and with caffeine and with ashwagandha, because I learned a lot of stuff in yoga with Ayurvedic techniques. So I treat mine with holy basil and herbs, ginger, turmeric. So I do a lot of teas and stuff like that. So I treat a lot of mine with vitamins, vitamin D. That's something else that helps me to remain calm, like going out in nature, getting pure vitamin D, and taking the vitamin D supplement also too. And magnesium also helps me. So I got magnesium, because magnesium, what it does is it helps with the body enzymatic reactions. And so it helps with the nervous system. So, but it takes parents and it takes people actually learning science. Well, I'm a science teacher, actually learning science, but that's why science has to be pushed a lot more in our schools. And parents need to take the time to do more science related stuff because, like I said, I treat mine naturally. I treat my ADHD with natural caffeine. I drink coffee, and like I tell people, coffee helps me to focus, especially before something big. I'm always like, even when I drive, I immediately get some type of low calorie energy drink and stuff like that, and then I make sure I get the proper amino acid, and then I do my magnesium, I do my turmeric and ginger, and that stuff helps me to focus. Like I can really tie in and jump in and really like have that cognitive focus where my brain is not scattered everywhere. It's actually able to focus on the task at hand. And so, learning about those natural treatments for your kids and trying those. Like I said, one of my favorite is ashwagandha too, ashwagandha. So I do a mixture of all of that. I take them at different times on the day. If anybody listening has got any questions about that, please reach out to me. And I don't mind helping you. But like I said, do not, there's nothing wrong with medication. And we need to remove that stigma because some people actually do need it. I always tell people, just because I don't use it doesn't mean that's your right not to use it either. Because what worked for me might not work for you.
Right. All right, so we really can get into it now, but I always like to get that background so we can get to the real question as far as what maybe even employers might be listening to this podcast want to know. How can people, improve their workplaces if they understood neurodiversity more? Now, we got into it like where you might see it, but how can workplaces actually improve if you focused a little bit more on that?
Yeah, a lot of employers now are doing their employee assistance programs, which offer free counseling to people and stuff like that. So if you as an employer you don't have that, please get with a group because there are a lot of firms and stuff out there, and a lot of that package those things together in which you can there are certain counselors that are a part of those employee assistance programs that employers can offer to their employees. And I think that's very, very important. And I mean, free counseling. I mean, and not only free counseling, a lot of it is very good. And, and so, leverage that information, and leverage those services. Along with that too, I think employers need to, I know it's pretty hard with the economy, but like I said, with the insurance and stuff, allow your people to encourage your people to go out and get the type of help that they need, the type of help that they need for their children. I think, seeking out professional help is going to be the most important thing and taking time to do that. Practical way of doing that is just having chats with your people that are non-job related. And that takes 15 minutes. You know how you have your 30-minute chat about work? Well, do a 15-minute chat about how your life going, what's going on. Can we help you in any way? You're a single father, okay? How's everything going with picking up your daughter and stuff from school? How's all that? You got anybody that's watching your kid doing this time, doing that time? And get people to open up to you. Because, my mama always said, people work harder for you if they know you care. They'll go an extra mile for you if they know you care. So it's like, as an employer, you got to put the programs in place, which is, I would say, first start with an employee assistance program, because that takes away, that gives people options. You're not a professional in those types of fields, but but it is your job to have the resources to give to the people that work for you. And along with that, also having that open door policy in which people feel comfortable enough to tell you, me and my husband got in a big fight last night. And, he threw something at me, or she threw something at me. And, I'm not, my mind is just, it's the first time she ever did this to me, yada, yada, yada. So my spouse did this to me. And it's like, wow, okay. And now what's happening is as an employer, you can say, okay, you can take a seat back and say, okay, this person might have a bad day today. And if they do, I need to be able to understand why they had a bad day today. Okay, and then now you can start asking, hey, what do you need? And a lot of time, and they may say, well, I don't know what I need. And you might be like, you step up and say, okay, well, you want to take a half a day off or something. I mean, it's little things like
And
that.
Reggie's driving people, so there's some background noise. So something like that happen, don't trip too much.
Right, you feel me? So, but those are the type of things that you can do. And it's all about developing those relationships. And also, too, even if you can't do it, allow them to have an open door policy with HR. If you feel like, hey, I'm too busy to do that, have your HR, open up your HR program in which the HR people are doing that. And I know that may be a lot of work on them, but maybe hiring one more person that's an HR assistant, and their main job is to pass the resources along to the employees. And like I said, it will help you in the long run. Because think about the money. Okay, you said, well, it's going to cost us money, but it also costs you money when people have to take vacations, or they leave the job, or they do this, or they do that. When you have to retrain another person to do a person's job, that costs a lot of money. You have to rehire people. When you have to hire somebody, you have a job that turns over 4 times a year, 3 times a year. That costs a lot of money because they got to be trained. And then that also slows down productivity of the person that's training them.
Well,
and innovation.
Go ahead.
I was adding to that, and innovation of being able to grow in the clientele that you reach.
Well, all I can do is talk about it from my end. Like, of course, as a teacher, I look at it from the classroom aspect. Like you think of that neurodiverse, and you don't look at ADHD kids or kids like that, or other kids as like something negative. You look at it as a positive and look at what they bring to the table. They're smart, they're this, they're that. A kid is dyslexic, they're a high order thinker. So you got to find a way to be able to use that while they still might technically be behind in certain aspects, as far as their reading or something like that. The ADHD kid, they're hyper. You can use that energy, channel that energy. They'll be the one that'll be having fun in the classroom. So, you improve your overall classroom environment if all those kids feel included, or they don't feel bad because the teacher always yelling at them for not sitting down, or the dyslexic kid that's saying that their confidence is low because, they can't read yet, or, whatever struggle they have, they're not good spellers or whatever, it may be. So there's a lot of things that go along with it, or that autistic kid, or that kid that's Asperger's or something like that. They're going to be a kid that's not going to be the best socially, but, you can really increase that empathy when you're within your classroom. Some kids will start to notice that, they will become very supportive. So you increase that empathy within your classroom. But if you don't, create a classroom environment, you can almost alienate a kid like that, or you'll be that teacher that sit there and decide that, especially the autistic kid can't learn. So you sit there and just be like, whatever, and don't like include them in the process. One of the things that broke my heart the most, probably my 3rd year, was a kid that was autistic, and he at once was in the developmental program. And on the first day, maybe the second day, the second day, I think I was doing an assignment, and he basically was saying like, I'm not smart or whatever. It's just like, you hate hearing things like that, because somebody, that boy made some growth that year. He ended up going up on his reading level from an H2 to M. And what's crazy is that particular kid, I remember it was the silly thing. He'll finish his little work, and he'll read this little comic book, Calvin and Hobbes, every day. I didn't think he was even reading it. But he ended up going up on his reading level from an H to M. And I remember we switched classrooms late in the school year. And I remember, I think maybe right before the last day, he was like, "Oh, thanks for letting me read this book." He read that little book all year and went up 5 reading levels.
Bro, I'm gonna tell you what, like when I how it is in Knoxville County. There are a lot of kids that was under reading level. I had a very high reading level because this is what my parents did. Like, my parents were not like doctors and lawyers that had this super extensive vocabulary or anything like that. But what they did, they brought me a dictionary. This is when dictionaries were popular before the cell phones. And I always wanted to know about sports, and we was too poor to have cable. So my parents always brought the newspaper home to me every day and allowed me to get Sports Illustrated for kids. And I would steal my brother's Sports Illustrated and read that too. If I didn't know a word, I had my dictionary, and I would go get a dictionary and look up that word.
So,
and you know what? I wasn't reading academic stuff. I was reading Sports Illustrated for kids, Sports Illustrated in the sports section of the newspaper. That increased my vocabulary exponentially.
And that goes something else that I'm very big on as a teacher, because a lot of people that don't know about how teaching really works. It can get real grimy when it comes to how people teach reading, and there's like a whole thing where this method where they feel like kids should read a just right book and just at their reading level, and I always say they're just not gonna read it. So I feel like kids better read whatever they want to read, because even a friend of mine, he talked about when he was in elementary, a similar story to what you're talking about. I think he might have been in 4th or 5th grade. He was reading a Game Informer magazine, and the teacher said he can't read it or something like that. Mind you, Game Informer magazine, those type of magazines tend to be pretty high reading level. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
so
exactly.
Read it, and he appealed to the principal. Apparently, he won the appeal about him being able to read it. I'm thinking as a teacher, like, why wouldn't you let him read that? I mean, sometimes that stuff have inappropriate stuff in it, but I'm like, if he's reading that book and he understands what's going on, what you tripping over? He's reading a book on a nice reading level. Why you would think you'd be like, okay, he can read, not like, oh, he's not reading the book that I think he should be reading. Like, as adults, does anybody direct you with the book that you're supposed to read? If somebody assigns literature at work, do you actually read it?
And bro, you just hit the nail on the coffin right there. And me being a former educator, I think that was one of the things that made me upset. And I always used to try to relate science to everyday things that they were doing. It's like when I always talk about cellular respiration and cellular respiration and stuff about plants and different things like that, I always try to relate it back to stuff they do in everyday life. Like the way my kids remember mitosis versus meiosis, they remember that quick. They knew that mitosis was the separation and growth and development of every other cell in the body. And meiosis had to do with sex, as my kids have said. Come, we talking about sex today? I use that as leverage. You got horny. I taught high school biology. Horny teenagers. Use it. You know what I'm saying? That was their interest. They love talking about that. And they use and they that word gametes. Oh, they knew what gametes were. Like if I mention that to most people, what in the hell is gametes? My high school kids, they'll start laughing and chuckling about it. Because that's way, you know what I'm saying? Like related they knew that because yes.
And that's something I talk about. It's a whole different neurodiversity now with this technology and things like that. It's hard enough to instruct kids because they so busy trying to. That's the other part of too. People have to understand with all this virtual instruction and all this new stuff coming from the pandemic and everything. These kids are gonna be locked in on these devices. You cannot teach through traditional methods anymore. Their minds have shifted. The thing is, man, you got to teach these skills a different type of way. I'm very big on differentiating videos and different things like that. Because you learn teaching these kids through a traditional book. A lot of times these books are boring or they can't relate to. I mean, you better book some stuff about Fortnite or Minecraft. You better use them. You better use them examples. I had my kids debate about what was better, Minecraft or Fortnite last year. They can write through a whole dissertation on that. They can do procedural text and tell you how you play the game. They can tell you how you become the best at it, how you can buy a skin, how you can do all that stuff. Those are all the skills that they need to know. And say for example, I'm getting in my teacher mode. For example, procedural text 1 year, I had the kids. We one of the warm-ups and one of the video labs, we did the floss. And they was showing them how to do the floss. Kids love the floss. You can't even stop them from doing it. Or the shoot. Like stop them, like that's what they're interested in. I mean, they're saying they want people to just start that instruction, but you can't make instructors any younger. Like some of them, they just not here. They're just keeping the G with you. They keeping it a buck, as one of my friends said. Some of these instructors are old.
Right. It's just like when I used to teach with the groups and stuff, and that's the other thing I learned about my kids too. When I used to teach the cell, the way that I taught the cell is that I put people in groups, and they would have to teach the cell to their classmates through any kind of creative method they wanted. They can do a rap, a poem, they can act it out. They could do whatever artistic way that they wanted. So even kids that wasn't artistic, they still could participate because usually the artistic kid, the one that was like very artistic and very out there and going, they took over the project. They would be like, well, we're gonna come up with a cheer. Like you had cheerleaders. They came up with, like you had a cheerleader that took charge of one of my group. They came up with a cheer and they had everybody like doing it. And then, you had the thuggish kid in there doing like toe touches and shit. Toe touches and stuff. Excuse that. I'm sorry.
Oh, we all grown.
Yeah, excuse that. I got a little too relaxed on this. I got to thinking we was having our regular conversation, but they got in there and they were doing toe touches. And so, and it was really funny watching that. But when that kid that struggled, that had, people be looking at his report card and see that he had a high grade in biology than science, than math and English and other stuff. They were like, well, what are you doing in there? And then they already knew my class was hard too. And they was like, this kid, how has he got an F in every other class? He got a C in yours. And I said, well, I found a way to, because my teacher, it was really crazy. It was really hard to get an A. And I had a lot of kids in my class with B's and C's and very few with D's and F's. So I had that little slope curve. And I always tell people, I said, my instructional design was always for them because I feel like A is for excelling. You doing everything you're supposed to do. So that rigor, and you know what I'm talking about, I did with Bloom's taxonomy, making things rigorous, like when you got an A in my class, you was proud of it. You was really proud of it. And if you got a D or an F in my class, it was all your fault. You know what I mean? Because it's like you could ask my kids, they would tell you, they're like, man, Coach Harry, you every chance in the world to pass. He do. And that's what I always did. Everybody had a chance to pass. And my kids that got A's, like I said, I always had the high medium where I had more B's than anything. I always had more B's than anything. And then second would be, usually C's and A's would usually be equal. And then, my D's and F would be like very, very low. And, but, I always tried to make my learning where these kids could get involved. They could get their hands on. I learned that with football. Same thing. You put kids in a position where they can thrive. If you got a kid that's not as inept, but he is a go-getter, you make sure you put your leader, the person that's talkative, the leader on your team, you make sure he watches out for that person. Guess what began to happen to that person that's very vocal? They take the person that's not very smart, or quote unquote, that doesn't catch on as quick, and they coach them up and make sure they doing right, and they still able to do their job. And now everybody.
Say what?
I said now everybody has it, and everybody high achievers.
Well, and people don't think that in sports and different things like that, you don't see people that are neurodiverse and have these conditions. You just don't always know about it. Because even I know a friend of mine was joking with me that I always kept up with JaVale McGee. And, for years, JaVale McGee was more known as got JaVale McGee because of Shaq and the Fool. And people didn't realize he's apparently severely ADHD. Also has asthma as well. And that may have been partially responsible for why you saw him have some goofs and gaffes or whatever. That might have had a lot to do with it. Plus, it was almost in his head a little bit. So a guy like that ain't necessarily going to focus, but you give it to LeBron James and teams that are a bit more controlled. It seems like he became a new player under LeBron. So, it's that type of thing. You focus his role. You get him a guy like that, a guy like LeBron with a high basketball IQ that knows the right spots to put him in. A guy like that might calm down a little bit in that situation. Also in football, a guy like Tim Tebow, a lot of people don't know that Tim Tebow is dyslexic. So that's why you see he might have struggled a little bit with the traditional reading defenses and things like that. He's not going to learn the playbook the same way a lot of guys do. He needs repetition. Right. So a guy like that, he goes to the NFL, he's not going to get it. He's not going to play as well in practice and things like that. He needs reps. He always played growing up. So a guy like that, he got better at the college level. So people are like, oh man, Tebow wasn't that good. I was like, man, he sure won a lot of games for a guy that couldn't play. Exactly. But he always played. So he was dyslexic. So he wasn't going to be the guy that was going to study the playbook because everything was moving around, because he probably could have had dysgraphia as well, which is where the numbers twist around. So he needed to play. So there was reasons for possibly some of his struggles. It might not have been all he can't play football. Now, some throwing mechanic stuff there, of course, but it might have been some other things too that might have contributed to him not being as, when you say he's not as smart as or articulate or whatever you want to say, there's reasons why he might have struggled. All right, so to close out, Reggie, and this is this is more your lane. Like, where can people go possibly get training or get literature to learn about neurodiversity?
Well, I would say right now, the first thing that you probably need to do is go ahead on it and look up our sociologists that we mentioned earlier. Because like I said, she coined this coined this back
I think
in,
that's like your word with being specific.
I know, right? You feel me, brother?
Everybody got a word.
Man, yes, that word always get me sometime, but go look up Judy Singer, and really start researching the studies. And there's also a lot of visual aids online. And because like I said, you go to the source. I always tell people, when you want to learn something, you go to the source and go to Judy Singer, learn about her. Also look at the videos I recommend, but also look at a lot of the infographics that are on the internet. There are a lot of cool infographics on the internet that breaks a lot of this stuff down, and that kind of gives you a great foundation with it. And like I said, it's very much new. And then when I say from there, then you start now looking into the ones that you see every day. Learn about these disorders. Look at the ones that you see every day. I would say, first of all, maybe start out with autism. Maybe start out with ADHD. ADHD is very prevalent because you have people with sometimes a mixture of two of them, and sometimes they just may have one of the subgroups. But some people have a mixture of two, and so when you do that, that is going to help you to get started. And then from there, you can buy books. And I always tell people another good book too to buy is called Brain Rules from John Medina.
Yeah, Brain Rules. I read that one some years ago.
Yep. And how did you like it?
I like those some years ago, man. It's like a lot of things. I always tell people like Brain Rules as far as like people telling you things. So say like if somebody listens to this podcast, I don't know, did I mention Brain Rules? I think if we having a 1 hour conversation, people only remember 5% of what you say.
Yeah.
Like people only remember 5% of what you say. So that's to those people that like to have 30-minute instruction in the classroom, they're only gonna remember like 2 minutes of it, just a little tip.
Yep. And that's the type of stuff that Brain Rules talk about. And they also have Brain Rules for children. When they say kids are going through terrible twos, he was basically saying get away from saying that. What they're doing is exploring the earth and the sensations around them. They're trying to see what this is. They're trying to say, okay, what is this? If I touch it, what am I supposed to eat it? Do I supposed to climb on it? What am I supposed to do? And as they're learning their bodies, so they're basically connecting the world with their body and creating different pathways in their brain to have an understanding of the world that they're living in. So they're supposed to be hyperactive. They're supposed to be, moving around. They're supposed to have social interaction. This is all important to their growth and neural development and how their neurons react in their brain. So, I would say start with those two resources and start from there. And then, whatever rabbit trail or trail that you end up going on, hey, go follow it. But I do believe in starting with those two resources. Make sure you research Judy Singer and then look up those infographics and different things and learn about what neurodiversity is, but then take one or two of those disorders, quote unquote disorder or superpowers. I would say, people call them disorders, but I say superpowers. Take those superpowers, learn about a couple of them, and then from there, get that book called Brain Rules by neuroscientist John Medina, and then go and see what else you can come up with.
Excellent, man. And I definitely, I know the next topic I was thinking about, Reggie, is emotional intelligence. We dive into a lot of those things. We talked about strength finders, and maybe something we can dive into, but emotional intelligence, something I definitely want to get into. So I kind of want to end a little bit with that to let everybody know that's probably the next thing we're kind of going to talk about. But I thought that was a very important topic, neurodiversity, because in jobs, I think a lot of times people prefer one thing or they don't think about the different. And even in the classroom, people don't think about the different. And I would just tell people, man, definitely look into all those things because, man, it can help you in the corporate world. If you're a trainer, you're a teacher of people, or if you're a teacher of kids, like that stuff will help you. So I think y'all have to really take this consideration. But as you're listening to this, man, this is going to be both on my platform and on Reggie's platform. Just make sure you like, subscribe, share. And I just ask, the people that we're friends with or people that listen to, share it with somebody, a business person that you think this might be impactful to them. So email it to them and let them listen to this discussion, because I think it might be impactful to them. Even if you're a church person or church leader, you need to think about that neurodiverse and what that looks like. So, Reggie, you got anything before we sign out, man?
No, I'm just very honored, man, to be working with you on this, man. And, I'm, like you said, people that are close to us and have listened to this, and you're taking the time to listen through the whole thing, man. I have the utmost confidence in my brother and in myself too. And I feel like some of the information that we're sharing is top-notch information. And I say, get it around to your people, man. And that's not being braggadocious. That's just being confident in what we've been through and what we've seen and stuff like that. A lot of time, and y'all know me, I share, when I see people, things that other people can use, whether it's from myself or whether it's from somebody famous or whether it's from friends or whatever, I share it. And I feel like, I always tell people, don't wait till nobody gets famous to start sharing their stuff.
Well, and I just want to end with this, guys. And the reason we're talking lessons in education, man, Reggie's a former educator. You hear him talking about a lot of what he did in the classroom. I do a lot of those things. But you have to think about it this way. Me as an educator at the earliest form, I'm training these kids to get to where Reggie would train them. So you have to really look at that. So really, you start there. Well, maybe make somebody like Reggie's job a little easier, but maybe they can be very employable when they get older. If you think about that and turn what they're doing into a superpower and really train them up the right way. So I want to send off, man, thanks for listening to Lessons in Education number 2. Look out for our next episode in about 2 weeks. We may touch on emotional intelligence. Well, me and Reggie, we're scatterbrained. We might change something. So, thanks for listening. And I'll let your boy. Peace out.
Peace.